Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims. Yes, my favourite book of the day. We're going to be going through this thing verse by verse, breaking it down into easy, understandable, logical statements and figuring out who or what is Allah, what does he intend for you and me and everyone else of the non-believer world, and how is that going to affect us today in terms of world politics and what's going on in our lives right now. So, as I always say, if you have any doubts as to my factual accuracy or the things I'm saying, please feel free to buy one of these in any good bookshops or from Amazon, and you'll find out that every single word I'm saying is 100% accurate to what Allah has said in here in the words of himself. So, if you've been keeping up with the series, then you will remember the last thing that we went through is the story of Abraham in the words of Allah, and how Abraham set up this city called Peace, killed everyone in the middle of the night who didn't want to be a Muslim or wasn't already a Muslim, and then at the end he was telling his children, shut up children, you know nothing, you will do what I tell you, and after I die you will still do it. And then they die and they're in an elevator waiting for paradise. Allah goes back to the future and then he's talking to you and saying, all those guys believed it, Abraham's in the lift waiting for paradise and he believes it. If he gets to paradise, it'll only be because you believe it now. And how you prove you believe it is you go into all the other countries and you wipe out all the other people and a big genocidal war. We hate them, especially the Jews and Christians die. That is where we got up to. And then the last thing Allah says is, say, fear ye who would dispute our accounts of Allah. Everyone will be responsible for their own disputing of Allah, and that means no matter what your excuse is, if you disputed Allah, when he catches up with you, you are dead, headless, and burning in hell forever. And that's as far as we got. So, carrying on from where we left off last time, we will carry on with verse 141 and 142, which is 106 in my summary. So we'll go there. 106, and keep in mind, this is a repeat of an earlier one, so I know it's exactly the same word for word as a previous verse that we did in the last episode, but it is literally repeated in the Quran, and I think the reason Allah is repeating this is because he wants you to know the information in this verse is actually more important than you think it is. That's why he keeps repeating it. 106. They're all dead now, being Abraham and his sons. They're all dead now, awaiting paradise for Allah's glorification. Remember, nobody shall question what they have believed. So, if we break this down, the reason why Allah is repeating this seemingly very unimportant piece of information, he wants you to know, as we're reading through this book, remember, if you have any doubts or you have any questions, don't. Nobody shall question this. That's what he's saying. He's not asking you a question, or he's not making a statement. Nobody did question this. He's repeating this now to you in the future who's reading this, you, and he's saying, nobody doubt this. It's like a threat. Don't you dare doubt what Allah is saying. That's what he's saying here. Then he carries on. The foolish ones who did turn away from the Kaaba. That's the black block thing that they all worship in Mecca. You know, they all go around it. The foolish ones who did turn away from the Kaaba would say, what false teachings are your ears hearing? Allah is the owner of East and West. You perverts are unguided by him. End quote. So, the reason Allah is saying this is because after he's saying to you, don't have any doubts, if you have doubts you'll be in trouble, and by the way, all these dead guys are waiting to go to paradise, and if you have doubts it interferes with them, so they will also be looking to catch up with you, you know, these dead spirits of Abraham and his sons. So now he's put the fear of Allah into you, the reader, now in the current day, by scaring you with ghosts and Allah's wrath. He's making sure that you know who the source of these doubts is going to be from other people. The foolish ones. The Jews, the Christians, the apostates, the pagans, and the atheists. That's who this is talking about. The foolish ones is everyone who is not a Muslim or who isn't being trained and brainwashed into Islam right now. The foolish ones who did turn away from the Kaaba would say, what false teachings are your ears hearing? Allah is the owner of East and West. You perverts are unguided by him. So he's just reiterating that all those guys over there who aren't worshipping enough, you know, they aren't into the whole Islam Quran thing and they don't know about it, they didn't see the signs, they're not prostrating themselves to Allah on a daily basis, how dare they have their own culture and beliefs. Those people, no matter what they say, false teachings are in their ears, so everything they say to you, their logical, factual debates that they bring to you when they're saying, hang on a minute, is this actually true? Are you sure this is true? No, they're lying. It's all false teachings. That's the only thing they've ever been taught is false, and that therefore that's all they can ever teach you. Allah is the owner of East and West, so it doesn't matter whether they come from West or East or wherever on the world that these people who have the false teachings come from. Allah owns their country, which means they are a criminal in the eyes of Allah. They are an evildoer, and that means they're dead. And if you listen to him, you will be called a pervert, and you will be unguided. So what that means is Allah will stop guiding you if you listen to their doubts and you let them into your ears and you think about them. Allah will punish you for listening to the questions of these people, these foreigners, in every other country. That's what this means. 107. We hath made of you a nation in balance and reasoning, that you might witness Allah's messenger and oversee all nations. We did appoint him to test you of your faith and defeat those who did not bow. Allah will reward those who worship him and follow his Quran stuff, for he is wise and surely also full of kindness. It's a long verse, so let's break it down. Let's see what he's going on about here. We start off with a statement of fact in the words of Allah. We, Allah and the angels, we have made you, Quran believers and Allah worshippers, we have made you a nation in balance and reasoning. So what Allah is saying is, now that we've established these nations and they're all Muslims, they've got their messengers and they only believe the Quran, now that they only believe the Quran and follow Allah and worship Allah, because of them doing that, they only have balance and reasoning. And what that means is anything that they have done or do or will do in future, as long as it's described in here, it is balanced and it is reasonable. And i.e. nobody will have any claim against it or argue with it. So you can do what you want as long as you're following Allah's worship. That's what this means. He carries on. We did appoint Allah's messenger to oversee all nations, so you might witness these and come to faith. We did appoint him to test you of your faith and to defeat those who did not bow. So if you remember in the last verse, Allah was saying, Abraham made this prayer, and Abraham prayed for him and his sons and everyone going forward in time to have an appointed messenger sent to them from Allah. And that messenger was going to turn up. It would be someone of a different religion or some different culture who would then be called to Allah and would renounce their faith and become a Muslim, and they would be the messenger of Allah. So that's what this is referring to. It's saying, remember, if you see one of these guys who is Allah's witnesses, his messenger, and you see them, you should definitely follow this if you see these people. And remember earlier in that he says, if you don't see them and you don't see the holy signs, then you'll die. That's Allah's command. So in a roundabout way, what he's doing there is ensuring that the people he's teaching this Quran stuff to know in their head, you better have seen one of these messengers and those signs. Because if you are asked by any other Muslim and you say you have not seen these signs, or you don't follow the words of this messenger guy who's going to turn up, you are an evildoer, you will be killed, you are the worst of creatures, you will not see the end times, you'll be dead before then. That's what this is saying. It's a call to murder of Muslims, basically, who don't believe. That's what this is. Even though it's dressed up in nice language, this is directly Allah saying, O Muslims, if other Muslims don't believe what you're saying and have doubts, if they listen to these evil Jews, Christians and apostates, this secular lot over here, the foreigners, if any Muslims listen to them, kill them, because they didn't see the signs and they don't follow the Prophet. That's what this is saying. Allah will reward those who worship him and follow his Quran stuff, for he is wise and surely full of kindness. End verse. So I feel like it's important to go through that last bit, because that's where the real meat of the information is. Allah will reward those who worship him and follow his Quran stuff that he's just told you about, i.e. you must see the signs and follow his prophet, his guy that he's going to send, who is going to be following the Quran. And Abraham has promised and prayed for this in the past, for you to do this now. So he's going to reward you if you do all that stuff, if you rat out your fellow Muslims who listen to the Christians from over there. If they don't believe, don't cover up for them. Definitely bust them to Allah so we can kill them, so we can get rid of all the guys who don't believe or have any doubts, and the foreigners who have doubts, and the Christians and the Jews. We can get rid of all of those. If you do that, as Allah has commanded, Allah will reward you, for he is wise and surely full of kindness. So there's a little bit of a doubt creeping in there. They've said surely he's also full of kindness. So the fact is, him doing this is definitely a wise move for Allah. If you're Allah and you want everyone to be dominated and submissive to you and only follow your words and not believe in anything else, then it is in fact a wise move to purge the non-believers or the doubtful Muslims from your own flock, you know, to kill people who don't believe in you fully or dare to have questions, because you know those questions are going to lead to doubts, doubts going to lead to unbelief, unbelief means they're going to leave. That's not on. So Allah is wise to kill these people, but surely full of kindness. So they're saying it's actually, in the end, it's kind for us, even though it's not really kind to them. So surely full of kindness is a bit of a doubtful statement. And the reason that doubt is put in there is because you can't really say killing your own people who have questions is kind. So saying surely it's full of kindness is saying, well, even though we don't understand how it's kind, it must be kind in some way in the end, because Allah knows and we're just too dumb to figure it out and we don't want to question it, or we'll die, we'll be one of those guys. That's what this means. It's Allah, it's the dictatorship of Allah, really. You're not allowed to question it. If anyone questions it, they die. If you, as a Muslim, see any other Muslim question it, you have to kill them in front of Allah and then celebrate it. And then you also have to say, oh, that was really surely very kind and wise, to make sure that you are not thinking about doing it yourself and everybody behaves and obeys Allah's command. That's what this means. Those who search for guidance turn to our Kaaba and find Allah. The Jews and Christians also know this, even if they deny it. So, those who search for guidance turn to the Kaaba, you know, the big black cube thing in Mecca that they all walk around. What they're saying there is anyone who's not sure of this stuff, even though you're being told it now in these speeches by your imam, your preacher, even though you've got your Quran which you can learn to read and read, even though Allah's given you all these signs and He sent His Prophet, Allah's done everything He can to make sure you follow this, you don't believe anything else, you have to worship Allah. And then He's saying as a last final thing, if you still need guidance past that, go to the Kaaba, where there's millions of Muslims constantly walking around it all day, and it's inscribed with the passages of the Quran on this big black thing, this big black cube. Go there if you still need further guidance, and you will find Allah. And then it adds, the Jews and the Christians also know this, so if they want guidance, they should give up their religions, and they should go to the Kaaba and find Allah, even if they deny it. So he's saying they are denying it, but secretly they know they should be worshipping Allah. And what is also interesting to know, a little bit of trivia here, I don't know whether this is, I think this is still the case. Up until fairly recently, and possibly now still, the Kaaba, you can't even drive past the Kaaba in Mecca unless you're a Muslim. They don't let Jews or Christians even go near it, right? So saying Christians and Jews also know this, even if they deny it, that's to explain why, when you go to the Kaaba, it's only Muslims that are worshipping there finding Allah. Because obviously if the Jews and Christians knew about it, surely at least some of them would have gone there to try and find out if Allah was real or not. Even the odd straggler, like maybe two Jews and 3 Christians would have turned up to this Kaaba just to see whether Allah was real and worship Him. But no, we've got excuses again from Allah. Remember, lie, threaten and curse. What He's doing here is lying. And saying the Jews and the Christians, they actually know this is true, even though I haven't specifically told them, and they're not alive yet, because remember, this is in the time of Abraham. So even though they're not alive yet, they definitely know that the Kaaba is real, and the reason they know it's real is because it says so in here, and if you have any doubts, you're dead. And they will deny it as well, so don't bother asking them, they'll just deny it. They're liars, they're hypocrites, they are dead. And you, if you are following this, will definitely believe it because it says so in here, and Allah never lies and knows all. And if you have any doubts, off with your head, you're dead. That's what this means. 108. The devils would fail to worship Allah, even if all the signs and all the proper scriptures were given together unto them. Clearly they are totally wrong in all of their faiths and their ways. So, the devils is directly talking about the Jews and also their friends, the Christians. So this isn't necessarily everybody on earth, just most of them. Everyone who's not a Muslim, who is a Jew or a Christian, that is who is being described here in the sentence, the devils would fail to worship Allah. The devils would fail to worship Allah, even if all the signs were given to them, all the proper scriptures were actually piled together. That is what Allah is saying. He's saying these flipping Jews and Christians, these Satans and these hypocrites over here that we hate and we're going to kill, They are so evil and stupid and dumb and we hate them so much. We know for a fact, because Allah himself is telling us here, even if all of the scriptures were in a big pile in front of these guys and they could see that it was true, even if Allah then appeared behind them with all of his holy signs with the scriptures there, if it was like a rigged scenario where everything is surrounding these evil Christians and Jews and saying Allah is real, here's all the proof surrounding you, even if that were to happen, they wouldn't even get it then, because they're either evil or stupid and they're just not going to get it, and that is why they are totally wrong in their faiths and their ways. You see what he's doing there? So now we've gone through the whole bit about, remember these guys who are dead, they're waiting to go to paradise, so you have to do this. If you don't, you're dead. By the way, if anyone else has any doubts about it, they're dead and you have to kill them. And then you have to celebrate the fact that you killed them and say, how wise and kind is Allah for having me kill this guy here who's also a Muslim. If anyone who isn't a Muslim brings you any questions or has any doubts, they're wrong. And the proof of them being wrong is they don't even worship the Kaaba, even though they're not allowed to go to the Kaaba because they'll get killed at the border or they'll get turned away. And the final thing is these devils that we're talking about, even if everything was aligned and they saw all the evidence and Allah was personally there reading the Quran to them to prove that it was true, they still wouldn't believe it. And that is why they're totally wrong and evil, and why you should never ever talk to them and believe them. And why in the future, when we go and do our genocidal end times prophecy and wipe them all out, it will be fucking fine and great and celebratable, and it will be righteous, and you will be happy about it, and you won't feel bad. That is what this is saying. So, 17 minutes, we're coming up to the last line now. It's going to be a short one this time. We're only going to do eight verses rather than no, we've done 4. This is the 4th verse we're going to do. So, 109. These hypocrites and Satans know well that Allah is true, but they will lie to conceal it, for their trickery is never ending, and they have nothing but doubting. So it's more of the same. I'm glad this is the last verse and passage to go through, because I feel like, even though there's not much to cover here, it's a very concrete, direct message. There's not a lot to pick through here. It's very obvious what Allah is trying to say here. These hypocrites and Satans over here, you know, the Jews and the Christians and the pagans and the secular lot, everyone who's not a Muslim, they actually, in their head and their heart, they actually really know that the Quran is true and that Allah is true. But they will keep lying to conceal it because their trickery is never ending. So what Allah is effectively saying here is these Christians and Jews, they're like the jinn, you know, they look like humans, they sound like humans, they behave like humans, but actually they're not. They're demons who don't have any free will. That's why he's specifically saying, even though they know Allah is true, they're in rebellion against him, and they will lie to conceal it forever because their trickery is never ending. So what that means is they can never get better. Even though they know this stuff is true, the reason they don't worship isn't because they don't think it's true. The reason they don't worship it is because they're actually devils. They don't have free will to worship it. Allah has created them as devils for you to go and kill in the end times prophecy. That's what he's saying here. Their trickery is never ending and they will have nothing but doubting. So not only do they know this is true and they have no will to go against it, their own scriptures and their Torah, which remember Allah claims to have given them, that is the source of their doubting. So they know Allah is true, but they can't worship Allah and they can't believe his Quran stuff because their trickery is never ending. And the reason they will have nothing but doubting is because in addition to not reading this, they've got their crappy Torah and their stupid Judaism thing, which Allah gave them on purpose to mislead them away from this, according to Allah in his own words. So that brings us to the end of our reading. I think we don't really need to summarize it for that long. There's not a lot of thinking that needs to be done here. This is just the end of the Abraham story, and Allah is putting a finer point to you in the current day now after reading through Abraham, that all the way back there, the first man that ever had a religion was a Muslim. He led to Moses, Ishmael, Jacob, Jesus, all these other guys, and they were all Muslims. Even the prophets that turned up who weren't initially Muslims, these other guys that you hear about who aren't Muslims, actually Allah is going to purify them and they will become Muslims. And the way that you know this is all true, because the only people who speak against it are those evil Jews and Christians who don't have free will and are only against this because of their endless trickery and deceit. And the only thing they will have is lies and doubt from their horrible little Torah. And that is why when we go and kill them in future, O Muslims and anyone else reading the Quran, in the words of Allah, it's going to be fucking great when we go and wipe out everybody who isn't a devout Muslim. And it says so in here in the words of Allah, and if you don't believe it, you're not worshipping enough! So you get your head cut off and you go to hell forever and burn, and everybody else gets to the promised land and gets a multitude of robot virgin slaves. We haven't got to that bit yet, that's very interesting, but we'll get to that soon. So that's the end of this video. Hopefully you enjoyed that and you learnt something. We'll go through the next 8 verses later on today when I've recorded that video, and we'll find out exactly where Allah is leading his readers in order that they can be convinced that this future genocidal war not only must happen, but you are the guy to do it. So that's what we're going to get to next. That's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, well done for getting this far, guys. We've got through the grisly bit. Now we've got the prime steak beef coming up next. So God bless, enjoy your day, and I'll see you back here later on in the next one. Take care now. See you later. Bye.